I'd like to welcome you to the League of Women Voters Sedona Mayoral Candidate Forum for the upcoming primary election on August 26th. I am Mary Chiquin, and I am your moderator this evening, and I'm also a member of the League here in the Greater Verde Valley. Before we begin, if I would just make a little reminder that if you have your cell phones with you, if you could please put them on vibrate or turn them off. Thank you. As I said before, this is the forum for the individuals who are running for mayor of Sedona. The purpose of this forum is to inform and educate ourselves about the candidates. For everyone else's viewing pleasure, as you can tell, the forum this evening is being taped. We have Sedona.biz who will have it on their website for about a week, because there will be other forums coming up that they will also be taping as well, so you can see that on their website. Also, we have Yavapai Broadcasting, Verde Valley Television, where they broadcast on cable channel 2, and they'll be doing it several times during the election. If you go on their website, you can find out what the times actually are. They will also have it on YouTube for Verde Valley, and you can see it on verdevalleytv.com. So lots of opportunities to review the forum tonight if you'd like to see it again. I'd like to introduce the candidates whom you both all know, or who you all know. Our candidates for mayor of Sedona are Cliff Hamilton and Sandy Moriarty. And I'm going to take a few minutes to go through the format of the forum so we all know are on the same page, and then we'll get into the questions and hearing from our candidates. The format is, the candidates will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and give an opening statement. We've asked them to talk about what their reason for running and their qualifications, and the biggest challenge they see facing the city council as they would take over as mayor, and obviously they'll have their own other comments. Following the opening statements, we have provided the candidates with a question. I'll share it with you now and then repeat it again when we get to that point, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer this question. And the question is, Sedona, an independent city, is also an integral part of the Verde Valley as a whole. Please address an important regional issue such as education, water, transportation, the economy, and discuss how Sedona could participate or be a leader in easing or solving the problem. And that the candidates have had time to prepare their answer prior to this evening. Also, we get to have audience participation this evening. All of you were handed a 3x5 or whatever 4x6 card when you came in. If you have a question you'd like to write down for the candidate, please do so. Raise your hand, and we've got some people who will be walking around and picking up those cards from you. What we will do is the league members in the back will sort of sort the cards out to make sure that if there's redundant questions, we're not asking the same question sort of over and over again, and to make sure that there's a flow within the questions. I also ask that you be sort of respectful when you pose the questions. You know, give to the candidates the respect that you would like to receive yourselves. I'd like to introduce a couple of people who are involved in the forum tonight before we get started. I'd like to thank Mary Gassawary, who is going to be our timekeeper. She's got 3 great little cards. One says 1 minute, one says 30 seconds, and another says stop. And if that doesn't work, the beeper also goes off. And if that doesn't work, Mary's great at interrupting. So that's the process we use as far as the timekeeping goes. And if the card gatherers could raise your hand, who's going to be gathering cards? Robin is? Okay, great. And she's also going to be the question sorter for this evening. So we've multitasked her for this evening. So I'd like to get started. As we do the opening statements, I had each of the candidates draw a number before we started as to who was going to go first and who was going to go second for the opening statements. I will reverse the order in closing statements because we are, want to be equal in what we do here. So the first opening statement will be from Cliff Hamilton.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks to all of you for coming. I know that time is a non-renewable resource, and so I very much appreciate you taking some time out of busy lives to be with us here tonight. You know, people say to me after being on the city council for 4 years and being vice mayor for 2.5 of that, why are you doing this again? Why are you running? And that is a good question. I'm running because I care. That's the really short answer. I'm running because I care about this beautiful place where we live, about these great red rocks that are around us, and I want to see this environment managed in a sustainable way. I'm running because I care about this city. Katie and I came here 12 years ago. We came here voluntarily. I'm betting like most of you did. Our company didn't send us here. We came here because we wanted to be here, and because we care about this city and to see that it's managed in a responsible way in terms of its finances, etc. And finally, I'm running because I care about the people here. We have wonderful friends that we know here, wonderful friends we've yet to meet, lots of great people in this city. And so the simple answer, I'm running because I care. Now, what would I bring to this role as mayor? I'm proud to say that I bring to the role of mayor a wide background in all of the 4 areas that our city operation deals in government, in nonprofit organizations, in business, and in community volunteers. I just mentioned I was on the city council and vice mayor, but I worked for the state of Oregon for a number of years, and I have lots of experience at state service, and I've worked in the federal government as well. So I understand government at all levels and how it works. I've worked as an executive director of a nonprofit organization and as a business manager of an international nonprofit organization, so I understand how nonprofit organizations work, and those are a very key part of what we do here in Sedona as well. I understand business because I ran my own small business, and Katie and I understand the whole business of being a volunteer in the city. We've been active since we got here. I'm currently serving on 2 city task forces. I serve as a hearings officer for the city, and I'm also serving in the library board here in town, so in this wonderful place we're in right now. You know, when people run for public office, often they come with a long list of projects they want to get done. Those usually require more government, more money, more spending, more staff, all that sort of thing. I'm not doing that. The city of Sedona has 5 or 6 really important things that have arrived on its plate in just the last 6 months, starting with our community plan, issues with the Yavapai College, new property that the city just bought over behind Los Obrigados, a whole new citizen engagement program, and the list goes on and on. What we need is follow through. We don't need another list of great number of projects piled on. We need follow through with the things that are on that list right now. I don't have any more time to add to that. We'll have a chance to do that as we go through this evening. Thank you all again for coming, and I look forward to our discussion as we move forward.
Thank you, Cliff.
Good evening. Thanks to the League for putting on the forum tonight, and thanks to all of you for attending. We really do appreciate having you here. I'm Sandy Moriarty. I am running for mayor, as all of you obviously know. I came to Sedona 42 years ago plus, actually, in 1972. I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington, and I graduated from the University of Washington with a BA in economics. And my time in Sedona has been spent in a variety of ways. I have a record of leadership, service, and accomplishments as well. I'm running, kind of like Cliff, because I love Sedona. We live in one of the most beautiful communities on earth, really, and I want to run to help keep it that way. My qualifications I'll do next. I'm a founder of the city of Sedona because I worked on 3 different committees over a 15-year time frame to get Sedona incorporated. We were in 2 counties, being run by Flagstaff and Prescott. We wanted to control our own destiny, and so we finally got incorporated. It took a lot of doing. I also served then, as soon as we did get incorporated, on the very first appointed city council. That was a challenge, a very interesting challenge. And I like challenges. I like problem solving. I like thinking things through, and I had, it was really an interesting experience. I'm glad I didn't miss it. We had 5 months to get a city together. No city hall, no staff, no ordinances. We had to put in place a complete police department in 5 months. So it was interesting, to say the least. I'm also a founder of Sedona Recycles, which is a model small community recycling facility here in Sedona, and I spent about almost 20 years on the board there, but I'm very proud of that. It's still functioning really effectively and serving all of us very well. I'm also a founder of Sedona Wine Fest, kind of new. We're going into our 6th year, but it's grown from a very small beginning into a signature event in Sedona in the fall. I'm very proud of that one as well. I have a very diverse list of other accomplishments, everything from youth soccer to Good Morning Sedona. You can see that list on my website, mayorsandy.com, or on some of the literature I have here for you tonight. I won't go into the details. I did serve as vice chair on the WEDLU task force, looking at options for effluent disposal for the city, and also as the vice mayor of the Housing Commission. I attended most of the steering committee planning committee meetings, and I also attend most council meetings. So as your mayor, one of the things I'd really like to do is find more effective ways to outreach to get your input. People come to council meetings to give input, and I think that's late in the process. I'd really like to find a way to get you all involved earlier to get your input. It's more appropriate at that time. Thank you.
I'm going to read the prepared question again. It'll give Sandy a chance to catch a quick breath since she's up first to answer the question. And again, that question was, Sedona, an independent city, is also an integral part of the Verde Valley as a whole. Please address an important regional issue such as education, water, transportation, the economy, and discuss how Sedona could participate or be a leader in easing or solving this problem.
Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
I've chosen education as my regional issue tonight. It's always been of prime importance to me in any situation as far as government is concerned. Education, prime importance. The city doesn't actually run any schools, but we can up the ante with our involvement with those who do. And in this case, because we're talking about the region, I'm going to discuss Yavapai Community College, now known as Yavapai College. I think some of you may be aware of some of what's been happening recently. The college, especially in Sedona, was proposed to be sold by the college because they didn't have land around it for parking and for access to public right-of-way. The city of Sedona has been able to help broker that to happen, that land could be traded with the private landowners, and so now they are, as far as I know, still planning to stay, which is good news for all of us. But over the last few years, the last several years, enrollment has declined substantially all over the Verde Valley, both in Clarkdale as well as in Sedona. And when they were going to sell it, they said, oh, we'll offer OLLI classes still, but not much else. Well, right now, that's about all they're offering. So it's really been in decline, and I want to continue to work as part of the city with the college to improve. Let's watch what they're doing. I think the best way to do that would be to create an administrative district for the college, kind of like the Maricopa County community colleges do, so that we'd have a lot more chance to have more control. As you may have heard, the college has proposed to spend over the next 10 years 95% of their capital budget on the other side of the mountain in Prescott. We're in the minority here on this side of the mountain. We probably always will be. So I believe that the administrative district is the way to go, and I hope you'll all support me in that. Thank you.
In 1983, an author named John Nesbitt wrote a book called Megatrends, supposedly looking at what the future holds for us, the big patterns that were coming towards us. And Nesbitt said in one of his chapters, it was about leadership, he said, future leaders are going to have to learn to be facilitators and not order givers. One of the issues that has faced us in terms of Sedona being a leader in the Verde Valley has been that too often Sedona has been a little too aloof, a little too arrogant, a little too far away, and trying a little too hard to be an order giver too often. One of the things, if we're going to be a leader in any subject here in the Verde Valley, we have to be just a little bit careful about that. Remember to be facilitators and not that just we're Sedona. So that really sets the stage for what we need to look at in terms of leadership. And I too want to focus on Yavapai College because that is one of those things that certainly is very common to us right now. Sandy's given you some background on what has been happening there, and I think many of you are aware of that. We're sending about $12 million to Yavapai College here in the Verde Valley with our tax money. And people say, well, we need to keep that here. And the reality of keeping it here is that we also need to have a plan for what we're going to do with it. Just saying, let's keep it here is not good enough. We need a plan for what we really want to have happen. And that plan has to recognize the fact that the Verde Valley does have some differences between our cities. Much of our workforce comes from Cottonwood, for example, and it really doesn't make a lot of sense to try and replicate the job training and vocational kinds of things that the college has been offering in Cottonwood here in Sedona, because we simply don't have that kind of demand. But Sedona is special, and we know that, and the kinds of special things that Yavapai College can do suit themselves better here. And we need to talk about the same kind of things about Jerome and about Camp Verde. And so we need to recognize, in being a leader with the community college issue, that we first have to be facilitators among all of these groups, recognize our differences, and find the places where we can maximize those opportunities when we do that. Thank you.
And now we're going to go to the audience questions. And Cliff, you're up first on this one. And the question is, why is it better for the Chamber of Commerce to hire an outside marketing firm than the city to hire one directly?
The assumption obviously is that it's better.
Or is it?
And that's a question, is it better to hire an outside firm? Certainly the chamber here in the city has an inside track to understanding our city. But outside firms also bring a kind of expertise that's sort of on-the-job training by local businesses who operate our Chamber of Commerce as board members and such, don't necessarily have. There are positives and negatives on both sides. What I think we really need is competition. We need competition between anybody who is proposing to provide destination marketing services to our city. Our country's been founded on competition. That's what makes people sharpen their pencils, sharpen their skills, sharpen their ideas. What we really need is competition, not just either the chamber or an outside firm, but simply competition that lets us say who's got the best idea, the best plan, and let that get us the best result. Because what I really want in all of that, as a council member and a mayor, is the best bang for your tax dollars. Thank you.
Would you mind repeating the question?
No, not at all.
Thank you.
Why is it better for the Chamber of Commerce to hire an outside marketing firm than the city to hire one directly? Or is it?
Okay. First of all, the Chamber of Commerce is in itself in the business of marketing, and they have the expertise there. So I think it is good for them to hire. I'm not sure what we're talking about hiring it to do. They have hired a marketing firm to put on a destination marketing campaign, and in fact, I think they've done a really good job. The result that I've seen, the commercial that's now running on local television, not local Phoenix television, is, I think it's remarkable. I hope you'll all see it. I'm so impressed with it. So it's their business more than the city's business to do that, and I think we ought to pretty much leave that to them. I don't think we'd ever get somebody to do the job of the chamber, if that's what the question is getting at, to compete with them in the job they do. And I think they're better equipped to hire a marketing firm, frankly. Thank you.
Sandy, we're going to start with you again. I know, difficult when there's only two of you. The question is, would you vote to give 5% of the total Sedona budget to the arts? And I would like to add on, what do you see as the role of the arts in Sedona?
Okay, I'd like to start first with the role. I think the arts community plays a critical role in Sedona. As long as I've been here, the arts community has been an important part of the community. They are definitely, when people think of Sedona, they think of the arts. It's a beautiful place, an inspiring place, and so it's only natural that they're an integral part of our community and a very important part. As to 5% of the budget, of the city budget, that would be a really big number. I think what most communities do is give, I'm sure the arts community would love that. I'm not sure we could afford it. I think that what many arts communities do is do a 1% for the arts, and I'm not so sure it's based on the city budget. I would support something like that. Thank you.
Can you read that again? We're going to probably have to do this more than once.
That's fine. I don't mind.
Thank you.
Would you vote to give 5% of the total Sedona budget to the arts? And I'd like to add on to that, what do you see as the role of the arts in Sedona?
Maybe I should take the last part first as well. You know, they say that Sedona is a community animated by the arts. So trouble is we never did come up with a definition of what animation meant. Obviously it meant active, doing things with the arts. We know we do that. We have festivals and events. We have all kinds of galleries. We have all manner of private artists working here. And certainly the arts are, as Sandy has said, part of what Sedona is all about. Inspired by the red rocks, inspired by our environment, inspired by our whole surrounding here, that brings in the arts. But the reality is that the arts are important, but they're also only part of what Sedona is about too. And we need to make sure that when we start talking about fixed numbers, we really think about our other needs and whatever kind of balance we need between them. Maybe 5% is adequate or right one year, depending on what's going on, and maybe it's too much or too little another. Coming up with just simply a locked fixed percent is not the right kind of thing, and I think you can get the notion, my answer in terms of voting for a 5% locked in all the time dedicated fund to the arts is just not the way to go, and certainly not something I'd vote for. You know, I don't usually talk to people about my role as an artist. Many of you are probably aware that I do artwork on my own. I do most of the glazing for the Loving Bowls project here in Sedona, and I have some other kinds of art that I do as well and have done for years. And I love the arts. I've been an artist for a long time, actually. But we also have to keep it in its perspective, and especially when we're dealing with your tax money, we're dealing with our government, we're dealing with all of the interests that encompass Sedona. The arts are an important part of that whole scene, but not the only part. Thanks.
Okay, Cliff, you're going to be up first on this one. Should Sedona make another attempt to make a shuttle system work? If so, how should it differ from the last one?
If I knew who asked that question, I would ask him for a little more definition, because I'm not sure where we're talking about a shuttle system being. Implication probably is the same route that the Roadrunner ran from Hillside through Uptown and back. But the questions about shuttle systems in West Sedona might also be addressed. I can tell you this, one of the things I've done very recently is get a copy of ADOT's traffic reports to understand how many cars there are going through Sedona. How many go across that bridge at Tlaquepaque? How many go through West Sedona? How many are coming down the canyon, for example, from Flagstaff? And the questions and the calculations that you have to make when you get those numbers, you look at the question and say, if we had a shuttle bus and it ran full all the time, could it haul enough people to make a difference in those traffic levels? And I can tell you that mathematically the answer is no. That was one of the problems with the Roadrunner. It's simply, they didn't do those calculations when they first put it into service. You simply can't haul enough people with that kind of a shuttle bus to make a difference, a detectable difference in traffic levels, if reducing traffic is your objective. Now, if it's simply a matter of trying to redistribute people among businesses in the uptown area, I can also tell you I did those calculations. And you can't haul enough people if those buses ran full like we had before all the time. You couldn't haul enough people to make a detectable difference among the businesses. They wouldn't notice a difference in their businesses displacing or moving people around in those areas. So I think if we're talking about shuttles or any of that kind of thing, we have to ask two questions. Number one, what is the objective of it? What are we trying to accomplish? And make some measurements and calculations, but we're really trying to do. And after we've done that, then we can say, okay, if it does or doesn't meet those objectives, is it still worthwhile as a social event, even if it's not reducing traffic or redistributing business and improving business through that manner? I'm frankly very skeptical about the possibilities of either one. That's simply what the data supplies us with, and we have to go with that.
Was there a second part to the question? Is should we reestablish the shuttle service?
Right, and if so, how should it differ from our last one?
Okay, I haven't studied it in the same depth that Cliff has, but I will say this. I do think that a shuttle service can be one solution, one strategy to helping to alleviate our traffic congestion. It's not going to solve the whole thing, and we can't expect it to solve the whole thing. But I would like to take another look at it. I'm not so sure, for instance, that the style of the vehicle was really what we needed. It was kind of a little too cutesy, maybe some of you remember, and I'd like it to look a little more like the Roadrunner. But of course, what I want may not be what's best for the community. I need to just take a look at the whole thing all over again. I think it is worthwhile doing that. We have to look at every strategy we can with regard to traffic. You can't solve a problem like traffic congestion with just one strategy. You have to do a number of them. And that's what I'd like to do. I would like to reconsider the Roadrunner in another format. I don't know what the details are, and probably most of you don't. But I think we all need to look at it together and evaluate it and get all the information we need. That's what I would be looking to do. I'd be looking to study any reports the staff comes up with the details, to tell us the things that Cliff has mentioned and other things perhaps. So that's what I would do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Sandy, we're back to you.
Put it down.
What is the second most important issue facing the city council, and what would you do about it?
The second most important
Second most
issue.
important.
Well, gee, I don't, there are lots of issues facing the city council. I'm not sure I could pick a second one. I think protecting the natural environment is always critical, because without that, we don't have much of anything. It's the reason most of us came here. We have to be vigilant about protecting it. So I guess I'll just pick that as my second one. I've got about 7 priorities on my website. If you look at them, I think they're all important. But that one, we need to preserve view corridors. We need to preserve trailhead access, all of that kind of thing. And I think recycling is an important protection for the environment, and having that recycling facility there. So there are any number of things. Was there more to the question than that? That was it. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks to somebody for a really creative question. Usually we get the what's the most important issue, and thank you for thinking a little further outside the box. What's the second most important one? And it is hard to decide what, when people say, what are your 3 or 4 important issues facing Sedona, we can come up with a list. But what's the second most important one? I would tell you one of the really critical issues that's going to face Sedona in the next council session is the issue of how we're going to deal with our capital improvement needs. We're running out of money in that category and don't really have a lot of things in mind for how we're going to do that. That's certainly one of the high ones. Maybe it's the second most important one after keeping us in fiscally good order. Keeping a fiscally sound government, a balanced budget certainly has got to be first, way up at the top there along with our environment. Second post is probably then dealing with how we're going to fund capital improvements, things like streets and sidewalks and all that sort of thing that we have to keep not only upgrading, continue adding to our city as improvements, drainage kinds of things we need to do. After keeping the budget balanced, let me say that one second, which of course is related to the budget as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, Cliff, we're going to start with you again.
I'll leave it on. Thank you.
Okay.
We're catching on.
You're both good. Both of you have sort of addressed this question in your opening statement, but I'm going to get into a little more detail here from a question from the audience. First of all, what do you see as the place for Yavapai College in Sedona? And then the key question that I think builds on your opening statements of both of you is, who should Yavapai College serve on the Sedona campus? Cliff is first on this one.
Yeah, I just need a moment to think. Who should Yavapai College serve on its Sedona campus? That one's really easy for me, the community. You may be aware right now that they're offering classes over in the high school. They teach classes in the high school. They're accredited through the college. You can sit in your own high school classroom and take a college credit class during the time that you're going to high school and start moving yourself further forward. They're serving that part of the community. We know about Ollie. We know about the Film Institute that used to be here. And perhaps some opportunities to bring those kinds of things back. But the simple answer is Yavapai College needs to serve the community. Now, what specific roles should that be? I think I did mention earlier that it makes no sense to me from an administrative standpoint, and we've got to understand Yavapai College's perspective on that. It makes no sense to me from an administrative standpoint to simply try to duplicate everything that they've got in Cottonwood. We need to look at Sedona as being a special place and look at special kinds of programs here. There have been times when they've talked about special medical education and things that would bring people in, as well as continuing the OLLI programs, the programs in the high school. And one of the things that's easy to do to find out what should it be is simply a community survey. To me, that's the obvious thing that we do, is we say to the community, What would you like to see Yavapai College offer? What is it not offering now that you'd like to have added? Then, of course, we have to get to that reality of what's doable, affordable, and the facilities that are there, recognizing that Yavapai College also has an opportunity to expand. On the 15th of August, they'll close on that new 4 acres that will now be next to them and have room to expand and a parking lot and a lot of things, and that opens up an awful lot of doors. Thanks.
Was it the role, or who should they serve? Who should they serve? Yes, I totally agree with Cliff. They need to serve the whole community, and I don't think they've been doing that so much recently. When you're just presenting an OLLI program, that isn't really serving the whole community. So they definitely need to expand their offerings. I don't feel like they've made a big effort to do that, and I'd really like to see it come back. I thought the Film Institute was wonderful. I think a Culinary Institute would be wonderful. Maybe even some gardens there, and maybe even some housing there. It's in the gateway area to the city, so it can be an integral part of that gateway. It's really important that we make it and keep it a vibrant institution in our community. It can offer us so much to all the citizens of Sedona, and it should be a wide range. As I say right now, I'm really disappointed that it's cut back so far. So I really hope we can bring it back. Second part of the question was?
I think you answered the whole question.
Okay, as I said, I want to work toward an administrative district on this side of the mountain so we can get a little better balance in where our tax money goes. I don't want a dollar for dollar return. I just want a better balance than 95.5. Thank you.
Okay, Sandy, this next one's for you. And this is sort of a two-part question, but it has to do with parking, so I'm going to ask both questions together.
Okay.
The first, how would you improve parking in the uptown area? And second, how do you feel about adding parking meters uptown?
Yes, actually, that's one way to improve parking in the uptown areas, is to add parking meters and make them turn over a little faster. I know not everybody's in favor of that, but I think it really should be seriously considered. It has been recommended by a study done in Uptown. It was done a couple of times in Uptown. The result didn't change a lot, so I think that really needs to be seriously considered as parking meters. I suppose we could also use just more, maybe a larger parking facility. We've right now got an arrangement going where the city has worked with the Uptown community to partner with some of the businesses to share their parking that they don't use so much on the weekends for tourist parking, and I think that's wonderful. That's certainly one good way to look at it. This is another one of those problems where there's no one solution. There's a number of strategies you need to develop. Look at it from all different aspects. I certainly learned that on the Housing Commission. You can't, there's no one thing. It's always a lot of little things, and some of the little things can be done immediately. So let's pick the low-hanging fruit, do what we can, and take a good hard look at parking meters. Thank you.
No, Cliff's on to answer the one.
One of the things an elected representative needs to do is, in fact, listen to the constituency. We've talked about Uptown in a lot of different ways, but the important thing to me is, what do the folks in Uptown want when it comes to parking meters? It's really kind of their part of town. That's a very special part of Sedona. And what do the folks up there want? Because that's the kind of thing that as a mayor and a council member, I'm going to be listening to. That's one of those things that really doesn't bother folks get involved with people too much in terms of the residents here. That's mostly a tourist area. As residents, we go up there fairly seldom. But what do those folks want? And that's what I'm going to be focusing on. It's really up to them. Parking meters, paid parking in some other manner. Let's find out what Uptown really wants. The answer probably is that they can't all agree, and that's usually the case with all the things in Sedona, right? But let's find out what they want first. That's my approach to that particular question. What do we do to improve parking? You know, one of the things I'd very much like to take a look at is how we put a second deck on that city-owned parking lot we already have there. You know, because you always want to look at what you've got and how to improve it before you go off trying to make something somewhere else. deal with what you've got. And maybe we deal with some paid parking there with somebody who'd be willing to come in and build that parking deck for us at no cost in order to run it as a paid parking facility and have some extra space with another deck. Those are all possibilities, but again, we have to look at other kinds of things, and simply space is not our friend, and we know that up there. We just don't have a lot of space anywhere in Sedona, being confined by the Forest Service. So let's let the folks in Uptown decide what they want to do about parking meters, and let's look at some creative things like paid parking, perhaps off-site, run by a concessionaire, built by a concessionaire, maybe on city land like the current parking lot, and see if we can't make some creative solutions out of that.
Thank you. Okay, Cliff, you're on. The next question is, what is your vision for citizen involvement? And the second part is, how would you achieve your vision for citizen involvement?
When I worked for the state of Oregon, somewhere about 1982, we started actually on-the-job training of our staff for involving the community and the public in a much better way. And I've been engaged with public involvement kinds of things ever since then. People get involved at the levels that they want to get involved at. They get involved in the kinds of things that interest them. And, you know, we've had the commission kind of process that we've gone through. That has been eliminated by the city council. We have a new citizen engagement program. And I guess I'd like to see, in that particular case, I would like to see a lot better publicity for that particular program. That is the one that's in place right now, and that's the one that I believe, since we've gone that direction, we've hired staff for it, we've eliminated the commissions, that we need to work on a while and seeing if we can't make it work well. So let's look at that particular program, at publicizing and publicity for what it can do, the kinds of activities that it offers to our citizens, and let's let folks self-select in terms of the kinds of things that they want to do. You can lead the horse to water, you can't make them drink. People will decide what kinds of involvement they want and what kinds they don't. Was there another part of that question? I might have a few seconds left.
How would you achieve your vision, whatever? If
Okay, I think I've touched on that. Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Yes, the citizen engagement program that we have currently, I think, is doing a good job. It hasn't been in place long. I think we need to give it a chance to work. But what I have seen so far is that it is involving people who were never involved on the commissions and probably never would have been. So I do like that model. It could be, we do actually still have a couple of commissions. Planning and zoning, of course, has its own statutory authority, but the Historic Preservation Committee is still in place. We still have that one. But I think that the citizen engagement program currently is reaching out. It does need some time to get people to know it's there, and some people took offense at the commissions being going out of service, and they maybe stayed away for a little while. I hope they'll come back, because I think it's a good model, and I'd like to see it work. It's possible that we might need to bring back some form of commissions, but I think we should give citizen engagement a chance first. As I said before, outreach is tough to get to everybody we need. When I look around the room tonight, I don't see very many younger people here. I've been involved with a lot of outreach in various aspects. The Housing Commission did a lot of outreach. It's always the same problem, getting to the younger people. Citizen engagement, the way they're doing it, is getting to the younger people, and I like that. So yes, I'd like to see it given another chance, a longer chance to work, and I think it will. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Sandy, you're going to be up on this next one. Where do you stand on the cost of sewer fees?
Well, where does anybody stand on the cost of sewer fees? We'd all like them to be lower. Unfortunately, our sewer system was very expensive to build. So people say, well, in Cottonwood it was a lot cheaper. It's a lot they don't have to pay as much as we do. They're not built on solid rock like we were. So to some extent, we just have to bite the bullet and pay those higher fees. It costs more to build. It's going to cost more to operate. And unfortunately, we didn't have a schedule of steady fee increases from the beginning. It would have been a lot less painful for us now had we done that. Now, the City Council has recently refinanced some bonds, and it allowed them to save quite a bit of money. And so that has staved off some of the increases for a temporary period. It can't last forever. But if they have another opportunity to refinance some more bonds, and so perhaps it can continue for a while longer. But the fact is, it's just an expensive system, and we just have to pay for it. It wasn't our choice. The state made us do it. Thanks.
I think we have a lot of agreement on that particular subject. Sedona is a place of hills and rocks, and we know all about that. Cottonwood's a lot flatter down there with alluvial soil down there to dig in. And it simply does cost an awful lot more to put in a sewer system and to operate a sewer system here than it does in some other places. So doing comparative kinds of things that we hear from folks, the fees are a lot cheaper in Cottonwood, they're a lot cheaper in Flagstaff, really doesn't accommodate the reality of differences in system. I guess I am real pleased to know that the city very recently did a study about our sewer fees where they asked a professional to look at the relative rates that our various kinds of categories charge for businesses and groceries and retail stores and such. They all have different rates. And they ask them at least to look at those and look at things around the country and say, at least is it fair? And they came back with some modifications. And some folks' rates went up and some actually went down, trying to readjust those kinds of levels. And that's one of the kinds of things that we need to continually do, is to be aware not only that our sewer fees are high, and it does cost us a lot to run that system, but let's at least continually monitor that particular system, as that study did, and identify if we're being fair to the different kinds of businesses and different kinds of groups and the different kinds of rates they're charging. As residents, most of you are probably residential sewer fee payers here. You're seeing just basically one rate. Unless you have low flow toilets, you get a different rate. But in the business community, we've got about 18, literally, different kinds of sewer rates based on the kind of business that's being operated and the strength of the waste produced and all that sort of stuff we won't get into too much detail about tonight. So that's the kind of thing we need to do to at least keep it fair. But as Sandy said, yes, it does cost a lot to operate our sewer system. I have a private home system that is one of those tertiary systems because you can't put in a drain field. It costs me actually a lot more to operate that system, to install and pay for and operate it, than it does for folks who are simply paying a monthly sewer fee. So we're all faced with the reality of the rocks we live in.
Okay, Cliff, you're up on this one, and it's sort of a two-part question that are tied together. The first question was, what would you do to diversify economic development in Sedona? And the second part, what sources of income other than tourism should Sedona be focusing on for the future?
For me, that's a really fairly easy question because it's one I've been looking at quite a lot recently. If I were diversifying our industry here, or our industry here, whatever it might be, I'd be looking at the folks who live here. It's true that you still can't buy a pair of socks in Sedona. You can't buy a decent pair of jeans. You can't buy shirts and towels and sheets and underwear and large appliances and small appliances and all those kinds of things. Wasn't it wonderful when we had Staples move in? We got PetSmart to move in. There's 10,000 of us who live here and another 4,000 or 5,000 people who live here at least part-time. We've got a large drawing population, and if I were going to diversify our economy and do things that were going to benefit our economy in the future, I'd be focusing on bringing in businesses that are going to serve the people who live here, because we live here all the time, and those businesses will be supported all the time. To me, that's one of the simple, straightforward, direct, obvious kind of things that we can do, that we need to do. And it would certainly be a lot better for us than driving down to Cottonwood, to Walmart, or up to Flagstaff, or to Prescott to get the kinds of things that we need. Let's recognize the difference between growth and progress. Growth is something like adding another pharmacy to Sedona. Progress would be adding something that we don't currently have, like a Trader Joe's or something. I'm not promising you that. We can't do that. But adding something we don't have, something that serves the locals, is the best way to diversify our economy here.
Again, I think we have a number of choices here, and one of the things we need to recognize is that we're in the last recession. There were a couple of industries that grew during the recession, and one of them is based right here in Arizona, and that's the wine industry. It grew during the recession. Now, while the wineries are not right here in Sedona, there are many services that Sedona provides for the wine industry. it will employ young people, and we have our young people here as well as in other parts of the Verde Valley. And we also provide most of the lodging for wine tourism. So, and then it benefits us all because those people who are staying in Sedona will eat here and shop here and go around and use the other Jeep trips and helicopter trips and whatever they can find to do in Sedona when they're staying here instead of down in Cottonwood, which doesn't have nearly as many choices for lodging. The healthcare industry is another natural for us here in Sedona that we could build and grow in Sedona, and I think it would be very beneficial. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. Technology is another area I think we could develop here. I'd like to pursue, as we were at one point, broadband in the Verde Valley. I'm not sure what happened to it. I'd like to continue to pursue that because technology and education can be very beneficial for our economy here in Sedona. Thank you.
Sandy, what do you believe is the greatest threat to Sedona?
Threat to Sedona. Another downturn, probably. Another economic downturn. I don't know. Yes, I think I'd just say an economic downturn. Well, if we lost, yeah, I don't see anything immediately on the horizon that would be a threat. We'd be out of control if another economic downturn happened. We can't control whether that does or doesn't happen. So that's about the best I can come up with. Thank you.
The biggest threat to Sedona is fire. Think about it. We've been lucky. The fires that occurred recently have been further away, up the canyon, up above us, a little away from us. But think about a fire that occurs on the outskirts, the edge, and comes into Sedona, blown by one of those southwest winds that blows seemingly so constantly April, May, into June. Fire is the single greatest threat that we face here because it not only burns the trees and the vegetation, potentially houses and all those kinds of things, but it leaves behind something that is going to be there for a long time as a scar on our landscape, a detriment to our economy, a detriment to our quality of life. Fire is the thing that is going to wreak the most havoc of most anything that we have happening. Economic downturns and other kinds of things certainly will cause a certain kind of concern, but they're not the long-lasting thing that fire has. Any of us who live near or on a Forest Service boundary know that you just sweat it out when late March, April, May, June come through, and then the monsoons come in and you go, whew, beat it for another year. But fire is the one thing. We look at what we're preparing for, sandbags and all that thing, for a fire clear up in the canyon and potentially having damage to Sedona and structures along Oak Creek. But if it came into town, close to town, next to town, we'd be in a world of hurt, and that's one of the things that really concerns me. That is our greatest threat.
Cliff, Sedona is running out of money for capital projects like drainage, sidewalks, and police cars. How will you fund these in the future?
We've done capital project funding in Sedona in several different ways in the time that I've been in town and even the time that I served on the city council. The first way, or the way that was when I served on the city council, we had a specific allocation of our sales tax money that went to capital projects. It was just a locked-in piece, like that question about 5% going to the arts. There was a certain percentage of our sales tax that went to capital projects. We've changed that now so capital projects have to compete with all the other kinds of things. Let me tell you what I would not do, and that is I simply do not support the city taking on any more debt. I don't support property tax debt or GO bonds or any of those kinds of things. I do not support us taking on any more debt, and I frankly don't think we need to. The city's been running about $1 million of budget surplus every year for the last 3 or 4 years, plus or minus, but it's been close to $1 million. There's a chunk of money that we planned on and acquired, but we didn't spend, that can go to capital projects. And I've looked at the city budget, and to me, there's some places in there that we certainly could redirect funding from where it's currently going into capital projects. And again, capital projects are things like sidewalks and police cars and and road paving and improvements in our parks and those kinds of things. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. One-time kind of expense typically, and then we don't have to deal with it except for maintenance for a while. But we've got several kinds of sources, but let me be clear, adding to your taxes or adding to our debt is not a direction I'm willing to go. Thanks.
I think sometimes we exaggerate the situation we're in that regard. The city, as the economy improves, the city finances are going to improve, and we may well be able to set aside more money toward capital projects. The report that I heard yesterday on the city budget made it look like that's a real possibility. Then these things come along like the sewer debt refinancing, where we got a windfall, huge amount of money just from finding a company that came along and said, hey, I can save you some money by refinancing your debt. That was totally unexpected, so that kind of thing can come along. No one's crazy about raising taxes, that's for sure. The only thing we think we all have to face is if there's something we really want and we don't have the money, we have to find a way to raise it. If you really want it, you got to be willing to pay for it. But I think we're doing just fine in that department. I think we can likely add to our capital reserves over the next few years, the next several years, as the economy improves. Thanks.
This is sort of a follow-up question related to budget. Everyone has a lot of concerns about the budget. One of the largest budget items in the CIP is stormwater management. I'm sorry. One of the largest budget items in the CIP is stormwater management projects. There are multi-million, multi-year expenditures. Are these projects going to resolve flooding issues? Can the city afford the projects?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure anybody can answer that. Can we afford it? The city's already allocated a great deal of money toward those projects, and in fact, made it happen a little quicker than it was originally anticipated to happen. They're working on those projects now. They have a plan to continue them on through for the next several years. Will it ever stop the flooding? I doubt it. This is, yes, I missed my chance to say natural disasters are the largest threat, because certainly flooding is one of them. And I don't think we, or probably any other small city our size, would ever have the resources to fix everything completely. For instance, in 2009, when the flooding hit in Tlaquepaque and in West Sedona, right near where I live, nobody was expecting it. I've lived here for 42 years, and I'd never seen that volume of water come down the wash in that neighborhood and go through Tlaquepaque like that. So we can't know. Probably we can't fix it so nothing will ever flood. I really doubt it. But we can alleviate some of it, and we're doing that now, and we'll continue to do that. I think everyone on the council has seen that as a major priority in the last few years, and I certainly am with them on that. Thank you.
Let me start with the question of can we fix it? Flooding issues have to do with certain levels. You hear about us fixing flooding problems at the 10-year storm level, the 25-year storm level, the 50-year storm level, the 100-year storm level. And we have to choose one of those levels in there and accept the trade-offs that go with levels above that. The city has often chosen the level of 25-year storms, designing culverts, designing drainage systems, designing ditches, and those kinds of things to carry away the volume of water that's estimated to occur in a 25-year storm. And recognizing that if it's bigger than that, it's a 50-year storm, it's a 100-year storm, well, we're just accepting the trade-offs that go with that. In order to totally fix the drainage problems in Sedona, you would have to make such massive ditches through people's backyards that in many cases that we eliminate the backyard and the house to boot. You know, and what have we gained when we do that? So we have to choose a particular level of flooding control that we're going to target and accept that if we get a storm that's more aggressive and bigger than that, well, things are just going to flood and we'll have to pick up the aftermath. That's simply the way you deal with flooding situations. And I think part of the question had to do with paying for that.
Yes, can the city afford the projects?
One of the realities about affording is that a city can do most anything it wants to do. It can't do everything that it wants to do. And what we have to do is prioritize as a result of that. So when we talk about our capital improvement projects, we talk about drainage as one of those kinds of things. Those surplus funds that we have left over at the end of the year, looking at other reallocations within our budget that might be more effective on our community. Those are all kinds of things that we can address. Are we going to get it done in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, all the things we'd like to do? No. What we have in front of us is about a 20-year plan to work on those kinds of things, and it's going to take a little bit every year based on priorities to work through that plan. And in time, I believe we'll do that.
In today's world, citizens are concerned about the cost of government, taxes, bureaucracy. What do you think are the prime functions of our Sedona city government?
That's right, I'm first, right? The first and foremost function of any city government is safety. Public safety is the #1 prime item that governments are set up to do. When I talk about safety, I'm not talking about just police and fire. I'm talking about safe drinking water. I'm talking about safe disposal of our effluent. I'm talking about safe buildings, because we have building codes and systems that ensure that happens. When you go into a building, it's not likely to fall down. But the simple bottom line is public safety is the reason that governments were first created, and they're the first and primary reason that we have a city government here. It's your safety in all forms.
I would certainly agree that public safety issues are one of the most important things. There are the things that government does for the citizens. They do the things that citizens can't afford to do for themselves. But by banding together in a government, we can afford to do those things. They're going to do things like build roads, provide parks, provide every other kind of amenity that we need here as a group, as a city. That's what we can do. If we had to do that as individual citizens, we'd have no way to do it. And definitely public safety and public health are important. We have the police department for that. Otherwise, what would we have? I don't know. A bunch of citizens arming themselves, I guess. But and so those are the kinds of issues. It's the things that we can't do as individuals. We have to do them together, and that's what government is for. Thank you.
The next question, Sandy, what is your position on the NSA?
Well, the NSA, I haven't seen a proposal for a while, so I don't know what my position is. I'd have to see that proposal again. It's been several years since we did it, since we last looked at it, so I'd need to see it again. I can't comment on something I haven't seen. Thanks.
The National Scenic Area, or NSA, proposal for Sedona has been around for a very long time. It was here when, excuse me, when Katie and I moved here 12 years ago. It was here, and it's still here. National Scenic Area for Sedona seems like a logical, obvious kind of thing to do. This would probably have been a national park if it hadn't been developed and settled more the way it is at the time that they were designating a lot more parks back then. I'm very much in favor of the National Scenic Area designation. It not only protects and preserves Sedona with some other layers of congressional protection, land trades, and other kinds of things. It can actually bring us additional revenue to manage the forests around us, and it especially can provide us with another kind of literally free advertising to bring people to Sedona, because when you're an NSA, you're on the map in a whole different kind of way. I'm very much in support of Sedona becoming an NSA. There have been various kinds of proposals, but there's a great deal of generality to all of them. And when I speak about being in favor of them, the general concept of that NSA that is replete throughout literally all of those proposals is what I'm speaking about. Thanks.
Okay, Cliff, this is sort of a two-part question, okay?
Aren't they all?
3 sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the 3 largest issues you will face as mayor? And then, what would you like to accomplish as mayor?
Do I get more than 2 minutes? The 3 large.
We'll give you 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I was just being facetious, but thank you very much. The three largest issues we face as mayor and the city council, first and foremost still is the business of maintaining fiscal accountability and responsibility in our city. keeping that budget balanced, not getting tempted to go off and spend, because every year the city council's got all these proposals about all the new things that people want, all sorts of folks who'd like to have additional kinds of benefits and programs and projects, and it's very easy to start trying to be a good guy and accommodate those. But holding the line on spending is certainly the thing we have to first and foremost always do. We've talked about the capital improvement projects, and to me, under that whole realm of spending, looking at our capital improvement projects is one of the big challenges, and I've talked about how I would go about addressing that. And I think the third thing that we need to look at, especially simply at all of Sedona, is maintaining our quality of life. And that's a different thing for different people. For some folks, it's keeping Yavapai College active, providing higher education, those kinds of services here. For some folks, it's simply working with the Forest Service to make sure that they keep the trails open and the hiking and the mountain biking and those opportunities. Everybody's got their own definition about quality of life, but maintaining our quality of life, whether it's trails or the arts or those kinds of things, is another kind of general category. So I'm not talking about things that have crises modes to them in any of these things, of looking at what we're faced with in the city council, but maintaining our quality of life, our capital improvement projects that we need to do, keeping our budget balanced are certainly things that weigh on top of the list. And I'm sorry, there was another part to that.
What would you like to accomplish as mayor?
Well, I think I started that out with my opening statement. As mayor, I'd like to see us follow through on the 6 or 7 important things that have arrived on our plate just within the last 6 months. I mentioned the community plan is one of the things right up there, voted in by the voters in March as our guiding document for the next 10 years for how we develop and run and deal with our city. And dealing with a strategic plan for that city community plan is one of the things. So it's got timelines, it's got budget attached to it. That's one of the things I'd very much like to see us get accomplished in the 2 years as mayor. Will we get them all done? Heavens no, that's a 10-year plan. But a strategic plan that lays out a clear plan and timeline for how we're going to do it is something I'd very much like to see us do. I'd like to see us work with the Yavapai College, as I mentioned earlier, to bring the special kinds of things to Sedona and to recognize working with our community here and our Verde Valley community, that we make that college the best it can be and serve each of those areas collectively and individually in the best ways they can. City just bought a piece of ground down there behind Los Obregados, 3.5 acres. It's going to be a park of some kind. It was bought with park money. We need a community process to work with that particular site, work with the community to design what we want there, and get that sort of a thing underway. We need to continue to work with the Forest Service, since they own all of the land around us and are in a planning process right now, to see that this red rock environment is preserved and protected in the ways that we want. Those are just a few examples of the kinds of things that I'd like to get accomplished and the direction I'd like to go.
Well, the three biggest issues facing the city, was that what it was? The largest issues facing the city. I'd actually like to ask all of you what you think that would be. I believe for sure that one of them would have to be traffic. I've heard it so much as I've been going through my campaign. And we all face it every day. And in spite of the fact that perhaps parking meters ought to be decided by the uptown folks, I'm not so sure that's really true. I think we all as a community do use uptown. We drive through it to go to Flagstaff. So it does affect all of us, and I think it should be a decision made by the entire city, not just the uptown folks. We need to keep it moving there too. So traffic is a big issue. Lots of variety of solutions to it, some long-term, some short-term. We have to do the best we can to deal with it, and we'll need all of your help to do that, because we need you to work with us to figure out how we can solve that very difficult issue. I agree with Cliff that budget is always a primary issue. Every year. It's one that doesn't go away. It's always with us. So it is important that we recognize that we are a small city with limited resources, and we have to be careful. We don't have the advantage that the federal government has of being able to print money. We just can't do that. So we wish we could sometimes, but we can't. So we do have to pay close attention to the budget process, keep a close rein on our finances. But in terms of spending, well, when we have a good year, then we can spend a little more perhaps. I mean, when we have a bad year, maybe that's when we need to spend even more to help our businesses weather weather the storm through difficult years. And our community organizations, our nonprofits, they get hit during a recession too. So we have to be aware of that, and we have to be willing to spend a little more in times and then pull back and add to the coffers so we can afford to do it again when we need it. I have a hard time choosing a third one. But again, I think protecting the natural beauty, for me, it's kind of a tie with finding a better way to get our citizens involved in this community. We need to find ways to work better together. We're a kind of divisive community here in the time I've been here, and everybody seems to recognize it. So we need to find ways to come together. And part of the community plan is to create community gathering spaces, and that can't hurt when it comes to getting people together. We do need something like that to bring us together. We need to recognize that we have differences, and diversity brings strength. So between that and protecting the natural beauty and sustainability, having a sustainable community, that would be important to me. What do I hope to accomplish as mayor? Was that the second part? Again, that's one of the things I'd hope to accomplish. I'd really like to see us find ways to work together better, and I think that starts with listening to each other. So I'd like to listen to all of you better. Thank you.
Sandy, how could Sedona attract and nurture higher paying jobs rather than more low paying retail and service jobs?
I think I mentioned earlier in diversifying the economy that the wine industry and the health industry are two ways that I think we can provide better paying jobs in this community. There's a lot of potential in both and a lot of room for growth in both. So that would, in essence, be my answer. Also, education. Education can provide better paying jobs. So if we could increase our educational opportunities here, if we could make Sedona a learning center for the arts, or a center like the Aspen Institute or something along those lines, to bring that community here, those are going to be more well-paying jobs.
Maybe because I've had some opportunities recently to work with some people in that particular area. When you talk about better paying jobs in Sedona, one of the things I'm focused on right now is the medical field. There are opportunities potentially here in Sedona, and some folks are actually interested in looking at them right now that I've had some conversations with, looking at the kinds of things that might potentially involve medical research, medical education, providing of medical services here in Sedona. Some of you may or may not be aware that behind our medical center here is 35 acres. That's a big chunk of ground to start with. Over next to our community college, that old cultural park site, there's 40 acres there. Sometimes we say, well, we don't have any space to do anything. We don't have a lot of space. Some is kind of spread out, but there's some places where we do have some space. And if I were looking at well-paying jobs, I'd be looking at the professional fields, beginning with the medical field, and I do see some opportunities there. Certainly technology can drive some things. We're not going to build an Apple plant here or something like that. We don't have space for that. But potentially in-home technologies or in-home businesses that are technology driven offer some opportunities for higher paying jobs. The question might be, with some of those, will it result in any additional income to the city? Operating a business out of your home that's technology based, where you're doing web services or whatever for somebody in New York or wherever, may or may not have much benefit in terms of generating sales tax to operate our city. So we need to look at this from two different directions. One is, not only is it a higher paying job, but secondly, does it then bring in, as a result of that, additional spending that generates additional revenue to operate our city? Some of them do, and some of them probably do not.
Okay, Cliff, what opportunities do you see for public-private partnerships in the city?
Boy, I like these impromptu questions. Isn't it? This is really kind of fun, actually. Public-private partnerships. You know, we've talked about making Sedona a center for arts education. I think about the possibilities of our city working with a number of already existing art education kinds of things going on here that have never been collected together. if we as a city, working with those individual artists, those individual art institutions, were assembling an art education, I won't call it a curriculum, but an art education catalog, almost like you see on a college catalog, we could come up with a heck of a catalog right now just with the people who are offering that kind of thing here. Those are the kinds of things that would give us a chance to actually create a public-private partnership in that sense. I mentioned the business of parking, putting a second deck on the parking lot that's in Uptown through a public-private partnership kind of thing with a concessionaire to run that. We've talked about public-private partnerships potentially to run our sewer plant. The reality of that probably is it would cost you a lot higher sewer bill if we had to do that, because it wouldn't probably be subsidized by 30% of the sales tax if we took it to that extent. But those are possibilities for public-private partnerships, and we have to look at them one at a time through education, through the various businesses and industries that are here centered around tourism, the medical fields. There's all sorts of possibilities there, one at a time.
I'm sure I can't name all of them tonight. I think we have a lot of nonprofits here in Sedona and the Verde Valley, and I'm sure there are many opportunities, certainly, as Cliff mentioned, in the arts. Also, I think that we are working with the college and with, and that's really public, I guess. So public-private. I know that in housing, for instance, there's a great opportunity for public-private partnerships. The city can't do all we might want to do in terms of affordable housing for folks, but there are a lot of private housing nonprofits that can help with that. And so that's one great opportunity, I think, for public-private partnerships. I'd have to really study the issue and, again, listen to all of you. What opportunities do you see for that? I'm sure all of you have some ideas with nonprofits that you've worked for and worked with. And we have to take advantage of all of those opportunities when we have a small government here and a small city loaded with nonprofits. Let's find those opportunities. Thank you.
Sandy, where do you stand on home rule and why?
Well, this is a no-brainer for me. I absolutely support home rule. I hope most of you do join me in that. Next week, when the Chamber has their candidates forum, there will be a presentation there about home rule. Home rule basically allows the city to spend the money that it has. And if it doesn't pass, we'll have a bunch of money sitting there that we can't spend. So, to me, that's kind of a no-brainer. I'd like to see it, frankly, just go away. I don't think it was a good idea to start with. Unfortunately, it happened a long time ago. It would probably be very difficult to change the law. There is another option we have to make it kind of semi-permanent. The details escape me at the moment, but it's something I think the city needs to look at, and I believe the city intends to look at that option. But in the meantime, absolutely, I support home rule. Coming up a little quicker this time because of the change in the election cycle, but very definitely. We take in all this tax money. If we're going to be limited by the state as we grow, we'll take in even more. We just couldn't spend it. Doesn't make any sense. Thanks.
Yes, I too strongly support home rule. It is what it says it is, home rule. It's about us setting our own budget levels rather than the legislature setting a budget level for us that is applied broadly to some cities all the way across the state, regardless of what conditions they exist in. One of the things that affects Sedona in terms of this home rule question is that our big tourist population is not counted when the legislature uses a formula that sets how much that city can spend. It's a formula that was started back in 1983 when this whole thing started up, and the legislature set a certain standard and said cities could not let their budget rise more than a certain percentage each year. And that would be fine if you'd started it on an even keel and nobody changed what happened with their city over that length of time. But the fact that we have tourist population that sometimes doubles the resident population in town, and we have to deal with them in terms of street maintenance and police on the street, water systems and wastewater disposal and all those kinds of things, simply raise our costs much higher than what they would be if there were simply 10,000 us living here and we didn't have another 10,000 folks coming through on a daily basis or stopping off. So home rule, yes, is a no-brainer. We need to control our own destiny here, our own city budget. We have the funds that are being raised to do that, and I strongly support it.
Cliff, what about affordable housing for Sedona workers? Is it even possible?
The city has three things it's doing right now in terms of affordable housing, and I'd have to tell you I'm not real pleased with the term affordable housing. We're talking about lower cost housing. We're talking about, because all of us live basically in an affordable house. We live in what we can afford, essentially. We're talking about lower cost housing, lower than the average levels of housing costs, whether it's rental or purchase in our city. The city already has several things that we're doing in that regard. One of them is called accessory dwelling units, where you can convert a second part of a house, a garage, an extra casita or something into an actual living dwelling and rent it out to people. We're allowing what we call mixed use, which is allowing an apartment to be built above a business area so people can work downstairs, live upstairs kind of thing, and in a smaller, lower cost kind of housing. Often when we have a zone change or something that somebody who's creating a condo unit or a new lodging unit comes into town and wants to do, we require those folks as part of their community benefit when they do that to provide one or two or several low-cost housing units as part of that, or in the past pay a certain amount of money into a pot that could be potentially used at some future time for purchase of land to construct lower-cost dwellings or something on that order. So are we, this is one of those things I guess I look at sort of like the serenity prayer. Let's do the things that we can. Let's recognize that we have limitations here and there's some things that we can't do, and be smart enough and frugal in knowing the difference. Thanks.
Well, having served on the Housing Commission, I do consider this an important issue, and I'd rather call it, well, there's no good name for it. I don't think it's low-cost housing. I think it is affordable housing. And I think if we want our workforce to live here and to any extent, not that they all have to live here, but I think it would be great to have some of them at least live here. And so many of them live in Cottonwood. The major barrier to housing for a wider variety of income levels is the price of land in Sedona. It's just incredibly high. So we can't seem to develop any kinds of housing areas that have, for instance, Section 8 vouchers from the federal government available. But we have to keep trying. We probably aren't going to get any large housing developments, but again, everything we can do. And the accessory dwelling units was one of the strategies that we used. I think it's been good. We were told it's going to ruin neighborhoods. It hasn't ruined neighborhoods. It's a good thing. And it has kept some units affordable. I'd like to see some more ownership options, and there are a huge variety of things we could do. We do have a fund built up. Many of you may not be aware that when we do ask for community benefits from a zone change, that if they can't provide a percent of their development for affordable housing, that they pay an in lieu fee. And so we've built up an affordable housing fund. It's there to be used. We haven't actually used all of it or even much of it yet. So I don't want to take a lot more time. I'd love to discuss it with many of you, anybody who wants to, later. Thank you.
Okay, this will be our last question for the evening, and then we will go to closing comments. And Sandy, describe your leadership skills and how you would work with the other counselors.
I think that's really critical, is working with the other counselors, and I've said in the past, the most important thing in working with others is to listen. We need to learn to listen to each other better. We're never taught in school listening skills. It's kind of incredible to me when I think about it, that that's really what we need the most, because when we think about our problems as we interact as human beings, almost all of the problems we have are based on communication issues. So we need to learn to listen and communicate with each other better. What are my leadership skills? Well, I've been in a number of leadership situations, and from, like I say, AYSO Soccer, I chaired the West Sedona Community Plan Advisory Committee. I've been involved heavily with the Sedona Academy, which is now the Sedona Forum, and the Verde Valley Forum for Public Affairs, and taken a leadership role there. It's really important that we learn to work together better. Let's learn to listen to each other and be respectful and be flexible. We have to be flexible. Nobody's ever going to get everything they want. We have to be able to compromise and work together. Thanks.
When I began talking about the question that was posed to us by the League in terms of our leadership in the Verde Valley, I started quoting John Nesbitt and Megatrends and the business that we have to be facilitative leaders and not order givers. I practiced being a facilitative leader for a long, long time, all the way from directing workshops for a White House project at one time on through serving as vice mayor here in the city. And the process of being a facilitator is one of engaging others, of listening to others, of asking questions, of probing for answers, and letting people be involved. That's what facilitative leadership is all about. It's not about giving orders or being a director or a decision maker. It's about involving others. And if I were describing leadership in my style and my preference and what I look at, it's that of being, as Nesbitt said, a facilitative leader and not an order giver.
Thank you. We will now go to the closing statements, and we will use the reverse order that we use for the opening statements. So Sandy will now be giving a 2-minute closing statement.
Thank you. I guess just to be different now, I've been sitting for a while. I'm going to stand up. I'd like to thank you all for attending tonight again, and thank you to the League and Mary for hosting this forum and Mary for moderating it. I've really enjoyed listening to Cliff, actually, and to your questions that you all came up with. The vision of the newly adopted Sedona Community Plan, I'd like to read to you. Sedona is a community that nurtures connections between people, encourages healthy and active lifestyles, and supports a diverse and prosperous economy with priority given to the protection of the environment. As your mayor, I'd like to find ways to continue to listen to the community so we can work toward that vision and make decisions that are truly best for the community as a whole. The only campaign promise I can ever make, because it's the only one I know I can keep, is that I'll always listen to all sides of every issue, educate myself the best I can about every issue, and then make the best decision for the whole community. I don't have all the answers, but together we can find them. I heard a quote I kind of liked the other day. I think maybe we should make it the motto for the City Council. To succeed in life, you have to have a wishbone, a backbone, and a funny bone. I'd like to do that on council. I'm asking for your support and for your vote. Thank you.
I'd like to remember 4 words that I think apply to what we've done here tonight: experience, leadership, vision, and accountability. I spoke about my experience in all areas of what Sedona does and operates as a city, in government, with nonprofits, in business, and as a community volunteer. I talked about leadership as a facilitative leader and as looking at things with common sense rather than traditional approaches. I've looked at vision, and especially about the business of knowing the difference between what is growth and what is progress. And that's a really important part of our vision, is recognizing those differences, that we grow our quality of life here without damaging our pocketbooks or damaging our environment. And finally, as under accountability, I'm independent of any business or special organizations out there. The only area that I really work in specifically in that is as a trustee of the library here, and keeping this, what I really believe is the heart of Sedona, operating in a way that I hope it will continue to do. I'm Cliff Hamilton. I'm asking for your vote when you mark your ballots starting actually at the end of next week. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. Thank you for spending and investing your time here tonight. We appreciate that you've been here and done that very much. Mary, thanks for moderating, and good evening.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I would like to thank Sandy and Cliff for being here this evening. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here and your participation and the really excellent questions that were answered. We covered a very diverse set of subjects and topics, and we're able to really delve into some real issues, I think, that are facing the city of Sedona as Sedona moves forward in implementing its visioning plan and its strategic plan and all those things. So I'd like to thank you very much for your participation. I have a few closing comments. Both candidates have information at the back table, so if you'd like to get some information, I invite you to do that. If by any chance you are not a registered voter, which I'm sure all of you are, but just in case, the League has materials at the back so that you can pick up some information about registering. The deadline actually for that is July 28th, so you might want to pick them up tonight if you haven't registered to vote. Early voting for the primary election begins on July 31st. And a reminder that those of you who are registered to vote non-preference independent can vote in the primary election. Those voting early need to request a ballot from the county election department from the political party they want to vote in, and when going to vote at the polls, please request the ballot of your choice. The key point is that you can vote in the primary election, and we hope that you do. So again, thank you all for coming this evening.